PR is often the deciding factor if your startup wins or fails. If I tell you about a company that was founded in 2013, and this company had amazing science. They put all the functionalities of a sleep and activity tracking device into a completely new form, into the form of a ring. And by 2020, this company had raised 24 million. Can you guess which company I'm talking about? The company I'm talking about is Motive. And I guess, like me, most of you have never heard of them. I have a press release here from them from 2017 where they are stating that they are revolutionizing the wearable experience. At the same time as Motive was founded in San Francisco, the Finnish startup Or was founded also in 2013. In 2018, they issued a press release stating that they are strengthening their position in the US market and that they had raised over 12 million. By 2020, Aura was all over the news, from raising 28 million to the NBA buying 2,000 of its rings. Or really used the pandemic to talk about the functionalities of their product. So from discovering early coronavirus symptoms. And until today, with every step they make, Aura is always in the news. So from partner announcement with clinics to having their medical boards to even launching an ad campaign, they managed to get earned media coverage from that. What happened with Motive? Motive was acquired by the digital identity company Proxy in 2020 and stopped their consumer sales. Although both companies had a very similar product, pretty much the same sensors launched in the same year, but they had very different outcomes. All the category credits and capital concentrated with Aura. There are things that we can learn from Aura. They really mastered PR. What this shows us is that evidence gets you the permission to play, but visibility really is what gets you scale. Who am I? I'm Clara and I have 10 years of experience of positioning topics in the media, from novel CAR-T cell therapies to disease awareness campaigns at Novartis to the modernization projects of the hospitals of Vienna. Today, I'm helping healthcare founders and companies get media coverage. So if we want to learn how we get those headlines, there are 3 things we need to understand. And these are the 3 M's. The first one being the message, the second one, the medium, and the third one, the messenger. If we start with the message, so how you can find your story, then one concept I really like for that is Simon Sinek's Golden Circle. Can you describe in very simple words what you're doing, how you're doing it, and why you're doing it? Here, really focus on the why, so your personal why. What was your motivation to start that startup? What drives you? You really want to find this emotional hook. What human problem are you solving and what should people fear? And there's one thing that is really important to remember. The most powerful statistic is not as effective as the average story. But if the facts are on your side, then you can find an even better story. This is exactly what we want to do for PR, is to have that emotional story, but data to support this story. How could this look like? It's about looking at the status quo and really describing how is the status today and what needs to change. Why is this current situation a problem? What is the broader societal impact? What beliefs do people have? What you want to do is really to find different angles to your story. If you're a startup that built a novel diagnostic test for breast cancer, then your first story angle could be talking about the science behind this test. The second story angle could be the patient perspective. So a patient got this test, it was positive. How did she feel? How did this impact her journey? What happened to her? Really having this patient perspective. And the third story angle could be the physician's perspective. Does it impact how breast cancer is diagnosed? And to find those different story angles, what you need to do is to also really observe what are the current topics that are already in the media. What are the current trends? Really look where you can jump into that with your story. There are also a few different factors that make a story newsworthy. The first one is if you can show measurable impact. So really concrete numbers. Patients helped, money saved, time reduced. A different angle could be the David versus Goliath story. So if you're a small player disrupting systems, democratizing expensive solutions. There's one interesting fact. A lot of journalists, especially in Austria, are very critical towards big pharma companies. So if you are the small player coming in and changing something, this is a very interesting story to a lot of media outlets. Timing is everything. As I mentioned before, if you're observing media trends, then you can also address current events, trending problems, topics, and regulatory changes. And something that always works is really having this human story plus data. Think customer success stories, patient stories paired with hard metrics. And if you're the first or only one, so really a new category, a breakthrough technology, or you have a unique approach, then this makes it also easier for you to get into the. But as we heard from the example, Owa wasn't the first one and Owa wasn't the only one. But they still managed to find some new aspects. Also, third-party validation is something that really helps you. Big name customers, industry awards, expert endorsements. What is newsworthy for one media outlet can be very different from another one. Think about a big daily newspaper versus a very niche, specialized cardiology magazine. This brings us to the second M, the medium. This is something where you need to be very strategic. Really think about where do you reach the people you want to reach. And here I want you to think very broadly. Also, what are the podcasts my target audience is listening to? Or what kind of newsletters do they read? What kind of news do investors read? Really thinking this through. Sometimes it's also not that obvious how you reach your target audience through media. When I started my career at Novartis 10 years ago, part of my job was for 1 hour every day just to scan the news, going through the news articles where Novartis was mentioned, but also where the therapeutic areas where Novartis was active in were mentioned. This could be news about new therapy options, new solutions. If there was news piece about, let's say, some innovation in breast cancer, then I would forward this article to the breast cancer marketing medical team and they would look into this. At the hospitals of Vienna, it was very similar. So we would forward news about also innovations to the leadership team. They would then distribute this to, for example, innovation managers or other departments. So this is why it's also so important not just to have one mention in one media outlet, but really be present over a long period of time, repeatedly be present in different news outlets. Okay, so now we have established which media outlets we want to target. Then what you want to do is to really tailor your message to the medium. So this means finding out who is the journalist writing about your topic, understanding how these articles are written, how they are structured. And this also applies to TV reports or podcasts. So how are they structured? For example, is there always a focus on the economic impact or a shocking fact at the beginning? So really understanding how journalist is writing, what are the topics that are relevant to him or her. This brings us to our third M. Different messages need different messengers. What do I mean by that? It's asking who is the most authentic person to tell the story. So if you have an interview with a startup magazine and the article is going to be about the vision of your startup, or a podcast interview, then the founder or someone from the founding team is the most authentic person to talk about this. But if we want to talk about technical details, then probably the CTO or product manager is the person who can talk about this. If you're talking about clinical impact, then medical experts, partners, patient stories, those external voices really add weight to your message. So we talked about the message, the medium, and the messenger. And what we need is a match between these three. So I have the image of a slot machine here. Unlike a slot machine, it's not pure luck, but being really strategic and understanding how news work. So really understand which story works with which messenger and what are the stories that really work. That comes with experience, but the first step is really to read a lot of news and try to understand the mechanics behind it. I'm supporting the NGO Spot the Dot. Spot the Dot is an NGO raising awareness for skin cancer and is run by melanoma patient Mariah Cruz. In 2021, we launched the Faster Than Skin Cancer campaign. Faster Than Skin Cancer is an ambassador campaign working with athletes and trying to motivate people to take notes of changes on their skin and act fast, so being faster than skin cancer. We launched a campaign on World Cancer Day in 2021. And this was at a time after the first part of the COVID pandemic, when it was clear that a lot of people missed their doctor's appointments because of the pandemic. And we had a survey with over 700 dermatologists from 36 countries, revealing that a lot of cases of melanoma, which is the deadliest form of skin cancer, went undiagnosed in this time. The timing was really right. So this was a topic that was a lot in the news already. So we had this data, we had the emotional story of Mariah as a melanoma patient, but also quotes from Austrian dermatologists. And we broke down the numbers for Austria. Our story was in a lot of Austrian news outlets. We reached millions with that. So what was amazing was that we could directly see an impact. After this news coverage, an Austrian athlete reached out to us and told us that he really recognized himself in the story, and this is exactly what happened to him. He noticed something strange on his skin, but he didn't go to a dermatologist for a long time. At some point he did, and it was early stage melanoma, so this deadliest form of skin cancer. He was willing to share his story, so he wanted to support us to raise more awareness. We recorded a very emotional video with him and pitched his story to big news outlets like Kronenzeitung and Heute, which are the biggest newspapers in Austria, and could again raise awareness and position our campaign. Spot won several awards for this campaign and was able to reach more sponsors to support her NGO through this visibility. This is why mastering the 3 M's is so important. It is important because media coverage acts as a third-party validation. And this is something you can then also use on your own channels. Every piece of news is something that you can then also post, for example, on your social media channels, and is very credible content. For a startup, coverage is lowering the perceived risk and also creating investor familiarity. There are even academic studies that show that startups with a strong media presence secure funding rounds up to 2 times faster. It all comes back to when you're pitching your story to a journalist. You want to make it as easy as possible for them to pick up your story. So, from really tailoring your message to their style, but one very simple thing that you can do and you can all start doing today is to have a press section on your website. And here also I have a press kit and materials. I added the example of Aura here again. So on their websites, they have this section with recent news, but also a link to a Google Drive where they have imagery about their product, but also fact sheets about all the technical details of the product. Of course, Aura is a consumer product, but even if you have a B2B solution, then having pictures of your team, of you, having a fact sheet about your startup, about your product, is something that is going to make it easier for journalists to pick up your information and use this information. If you remember from the beginning, Motive was acquired by the digital identity company Proxy. In 2023, Proxy was also bought. Now you can guess by whom? Right, by Aura. Today, Aura stands at a valuation of $11 billion. So I really want to drive home this point. The main difference between being bought and having huge success and buying your competition is really visibility. Do you want to become Motive or Aura? If you want to discover how we can position your startup in the media and get you visibility, then reach out to me and let's have a call.